Behind every struggle, there's a story, and every story deserves to be heard. This is the Your Life Matters Show podcast. Your hosts are Steve Hodgson and licensed psychotherapist Dr. Eric L. Davis.
Mental illness affects millions of people every year. In the United States alone, tens of millions of adults live with conditions like depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. For many, treatment brings relief, therapy, medication, support. But for others, the pain doesn't go away. When symptoms become severe, when depression becomes life-threatening, more aggressive treatments are sometimes considered. One of those treatments is electroconvulsive therapy, also known as ECT, also known as shock treatment. ECT has been used for decades, and in many cases it is described as safe and effective. But like all medical treatments, there are risks, and for some patients, those risks can be life-altering. Tonight we bring you the story of one of those patients, a woman who spent her life helping others as a social worker, a woman who battled OCD from childhood, anorexia as a teenager, and years of anxiety and depression, until one day the pain became too much, and she was told this could help. Over 100 shock treatments. What followed was something she was never prepared for. Severe cognitive effects, migraines, difficulty processing, and the loss of nearly 20 years of her memories of her life, gone. But tonight, this is not just a story of loss. It's a story of resilience, of rebuilding, of finding identity again, when so much had been taken. Today, she is speaking out, not just for herself, but for every patient who deserves to be fully informed, to be heard, and to be protected, because mental health care should never come at the cost of truth. Tonight we hear from Lisa A. Conway. Here are your hosts.
Well, howdy, and welcome to the Your Life Matters Show podcast, where we have real conversations about mental health, one story at a time. I'm your host, Steve Hodgson. Alongside me is the ever-loving and debonair Dr. Eric L. Davis. Dr. Davis, I know we got a really, really good show today. Yeah. It's a story that, I got to be honest. I mean, electric shock therapy, we thought of something, back in the movies, you saw that stuff. Or, as paranormal investigator, when we used to go into these old asylums and stuff like that, and they used to say, they used to use shock therapy on people's minds and stuff. That's the extent of what I knew about this. But her story is, one of those Monty Pythons, and now for something completely different.
Yeah.
It's this is really, really a good story. But if you would, please give a listen and consider our sponsor, Waypost Counseling. Now, you may wonder why we run a commercial sponsor each week. Now, the reason's twofold. First, and most importantly, we offer you support and help each week if you're suffering from any kind of mental health issue. Now, you may not know where to turn to locally, or maybe even embarrassed to go to your local psychologist's office. Maybe it's next door to the hair salon. I've seen that in one of the places there, and you don't want to be seen. I get it. So, Waypost Counseling, you can do the counseling sessions for the privacy of your home. You can use your webcam and your PC, your laptop. Get the help that you need starting today. Secondly, they generously allow us to present this episode each week without YouTube commercials, because there are costs involved in doing this show here. Okay, This helps, continuity on the subject we're talking about. Because, again, there are people that need help, that see themselves in this and say, well, now what am I supposed to do? Okay, and if you don't have any place to turn, pick up the phone and call Waypost Counseling. And it's really something that's very beneficial. May even get to speak to Dr. Davis if you call too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. So let's give them a listen.
Do you sometimes go through life and begin to think maybe something in your life feels off? Not broken, not falling apart, just heavier than it used to be. Stress, anxiety, thoughts that don't quiet down. Or maybe it's your relationship, conversations turning into arguments, distance growing where connection used to be, and you're not sure how to get back. Or maybe it's something more private, like gambling, something that started small, but now it's affecting your finances, your relationships, your peace of mind. And you keep telling yourself, I'll figure it out, but it hasn't gotten easier. The truth is, you don't have to do this alone. At Waypost Counseling, help is available for individuals, for couples, and for those struggling with addiction. And you don't even have to leave your home. If you're watching this right now, here's your reason to ask for help. We offer secure online sessions. You can talk to someone from a place that feels safe and private. No pressure, no judgment, just a conversation that could change everything. If something in you is saying, "Are they talking about me?" Maybe it's time. It's time to listen to that voice inside that is begging you to relieve the stress and anxiety and make the call. Waypost Counseling. Dial 317-762-0904 or dial 317-659-0179. Also, you can visit them on the web at waypostcounseling.com for more information, because we do not need to tell you your life does matters. And taking that first step could make all the difference. Remember that reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to begin to get the best of your life back again. Please, for you and your loved ones, make the call now.
Dr. Davis, tonight's episode is one of those conversations that I think is going to stay with a lot of people for a long time, because I know it's going to stay with me. We'll be talking about severe mental illness, treatment, resistant depression, and a form of treatment that many people have never heard of, okay, or may have heard of but not fully understand. Electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, often referred to as shock therapy.
Yeah, this is one of those topics where there's a lot of complexity. ECT has been used in the mental health field for decades, and for some individuals, it can provide relief when other treatments haven't worked. But like any medical intervention, it's not without its risks, and it's important we talk about those openly and responsibly.
You know what really today is about is ECT. Okay, whether it works, whether it doesn't work, and what happens when it's done improperly. You know, this is not about telling people what to think. It's about helping people understand. Because today we're joined by someone who didn't just study it, she lived it.
Lisa A. Conway is a licensed social worker, a mental health advocate, and the author of the book Shocked.
There it is. Yep. Lisa underwent understand this, more than 100 shock treatments. And what followed changed her life in many ways she was never really prepared for.
Yeah. And what makes this conversation so important is we're not just talking about a treatment, we're talking about lived experience and what it feels like to go through severe mental illness, to be searching for relief, and to navigate decisions that can have long-term impact.
And I think one of the key words for this episode is going to be informed consent. Understanding not just the potential benefits, but the potential risks as well.
Absolutely. And also recognizing that every person's experience is different. What we're going to hear today is Lisa's story, her journey, and it's one that deserves to be heard with empathy, openness, and respect.
And that's exactly how we want to approach the conversation tonight. Because at the end of the day, this is about people. It's about lives, and it's about making sure those voices are not lost. So let's get into it. Before we bring our guest on, I got just a couple of quick questions, which is really going to set the stage for this. You know, it's funny, when I first started shock treatment, and it shows you where my brain goes. I think of that Simpsons episode where
Yeah.
they were all sitting around and they were saying something, and each one of them had like the shock thing, and like Bart would shock Homer, and then
Yeah.
Homer would shock Marge and stuff.
Are we cured yet?
Don't be ridiculous. You will be cured, but it's going to require somewhat more unorthodox methods.
Unortho what?
Don't worry. I'll have plenty of time to explain while I warm up the electric generator. Everyone comfy? Good. Now, don't touch any of those buttons in front of you for a very important reason, i.e., you are wired into the rest of your family. You have the ability to shock them, and they have the ability to shock...
Just testing.
Why, no, Homer, not yet. You see, this is what is known as aversion therapy. When someone hurts you emotionally, you will hurt them physically, and gradually you will learn not to hurt each other at all. And won't that be wonderful, Homer?
Oh, yes, Doctor.
Bart, how could you shock your little sister?
My finger slipped. So did mine.
Bart, Lisa, stop that.
No, wait a minute. Wait. Folks, if I could... that...
And we laugh at it because, it was a funny thing. But, when you talk to Lisa, you realize that this really isn't that much of a funny thing. Okay?
Right.
So for those who may not be familiar, let's get into the real heart of it. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. What is it, and what situations do they actually use it in?
So it literally is, sending electricity through the brain. So they basically will put, electrodes or whatever on either side, and then they are going to send an electric current through the brain. It would typically be used in cases, it's not used nearly as much now as it was in the past, but a lot of times like treatment-resistant depression, schizophrenia, any number of things. But typically it's with depression these days is what I've heard it used for.
See, now correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it so that your brain or actually body goes into a little bit of a seizure?
Yeah.
And the thought is that it resets the brain? Or
Yes.
Like that?
So
Yeah.
I meant to say that. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
They send the electricity through the brain to cause convulsions,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and like you said, to reset the brain.
Yeah. I think of many other ways I'd like to reset my brain and just send electrical current through. And I'm sure there's some electricians that would stand behind that too. So at what point does someone move from traditional treatments like regular therapy that they have with you and medications to something more intense like ECT?
Typically when the medication, like when sometimes, the therapy and the medication will do, there may be some improvement, but, it's just doesn't seem to be working, and so typically, electroconvulsive therapy would typically be looked at when other things have failed.
It's described as safe and effective, but it's like you see on TV. I was thinking of before, you see, take this drug, whatever the drug is, it's safe and it's effective. And then halfway through, your side effects can be, cause nausea, diarrhea, blah, blah, and they go through the whole list of things. So, but like any treatment, there's risks to ECT. Can you help us understand both sides? I mean, what the potential benefits are and what some of the known risks and side effects can be.
So the benefits, I mean, really what they're looking for is a way to, basically, like you said, to reset everything and to kind of have, to basically put the brain into default mode, so it's receptive to whatever the treatment is going to be. Some of the side effects would be, biting your tongue, headaches, any number of things.
And as we heard, short-term memory loss too.
Oh yeah.
Is one of the things they really seem to gloss over.
Yeah.
Might have a little bit of short-term memory loss, like right before the thing. So I guess they say that so this way, if you do have some side effect from it, they can turn around and say, but I told you that. Don't you remember that? Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. You lost that part of memory. Okay. Now, how important is informed consent when it comes to treatments like ECT? And what should a patient fully understand before signing or agreeing to that?
So the patient really needs to fully understand all aspects of the treatment. Like here's exactly what we're going to do. Here's where in the brain. Here's why. Here are the potential benefits, and here's the goal of this, and here's what we're wanting to happen. Here are really everything. They need to be informed about every aspect of it. Sending electricity through somebody is not a small deal.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when you think about medical treatment, like it has to be an RN or a physician to even break the skin to give you an injection. And so a lot of times, that's just poking a little hole in your skin. This is sending electricity through the brain.
Yeah. And that's I know they had nerve conductivity test, I think, where they were checking for carpal tunnel and stuff like that and
Yeah.
see so they're shooting little jolts, on your
Right.
fingertips. But they're little jolts. We're not talking about, hey, let's crank this up a little bit, on
Yeah.
your brain, Let,
But
let's see if we
ECT would definitely it wouldn't be a little jolt
Yes,
probably.
no, exactly. So one of the things we're going to hear about in Lisa's story today is memory loss and all the cognitive effects.
Mhm.
From a clinical perspective, how common are those type of side effects and how are they usually explained to patients?
I'm not sure, statistically where, like how often there are side effects, but um, I would think that when the physician is basically talking to the patient about, hey, so I'm thinking maybe this is what we should try next, that would be the time to fully explain all of the aspects of it because ECT is something, and it can be helpful. Don't get me wrong, it can help. But the patient just needs to understand what they're signing up for, really.
The last question I'm going to ask before we bring Lisa on, when someone has a difficult or even a different experience with a treatment, how should the mental health community respond to that? I mean, because we learn a lot from stories like the one we're about to hear today.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I always say that the best gauge of, if something is working or not working or any of that is the customer or the client. You know, a lot of times I don't think people listen to clients like they should, and the reality is the people that go through these things, I mean, who are we to question if, I
Yeah.
mean, if they've been through something I haven't, then I'm probably safe to take their word for what it was like, you would think. But I think as a whole, the way that the treatment community needs to respond is with an open mind and with an open mind and a listening ear.
Right. So, as we said at the beginning of this episode, we have a very special guest with us tonight. She has an amazing story, one engaging, a learning experience, and just a good story from a great person who's trying to help and survive in life. So, here's the interview that I did with our guest, Lisa Conway. Listen, before we start the interview with Lisa, I'd like to say a couple of very quick things, if I may. First, Dr. Davis had to be at a conference, so the interview was just with Lisa and myself. Secondly, it's a bit longer than usual, but let me tell you, there's nothing I would edit out from what she said. Thirdly, as she mentions in the interview, she started with a full tank of energy, which slowly drained throughout the interview, and you can notice that as we go through. And lastly, there's a few times where Lisa was slow to answer. I ask that our listeners do not judge, and remember she's suffering from a brain injury. Her brain was electrically shocked over 100 times. Now, normal number is no more than 15 to 20. Her brain does not always think as fast for replies. Plus, sadly, I was asking questions about her past, which a lot of that memory is now gone. Now, that's very, very sad. But I will say this, that Lisa is a great trooper and does an outstanding job bringing attention to her and many others' plight, and she should be highly commended for that. So here's our interview. Lisa, thank you so much for being with us here today. I want to start by saying your willingness to share your story, not just as a professional, but as someone who's lived through so much, really means a lot. And, we're truly grateful you're here. Your perspective, both as a social worker and as someone with lived experience, is incredibly valuable to everyone. So
Thank you.
I want to ask you if you could take us back for those, because like me, you're meeting you for the first time here today. Tell us a little something about yourself. I mean, where you grew up, what it was like for you as a child.
I thought I grew up normal. I was born in New York, grew up in Pennsylvania, and grew up in New Jersey, and went to college in Pennsylvania, and I never left. So, big Italian family, lots of family gatherings, lots of cousins to play with. Everything was pretty kosher. And when I was about 8 years old, I started doing these crazy things in my head, like counting things, or I was spelling things in my head, like a person would be talking, and my inside my head is like a little typewriter. So I spell out everything that a person is saying. Later on, I found out that, because that got very, very bad, that I had obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay. And when my anxiety was worse, because I had anxiety, that had a tendency to kick in. And when I was in high school, I started with an eating disorder, not wanting to. It's just, when someone says to you, "Oh my gosh, you look good. Did you lose some weight?" Well, yeah. So, and that goes on and on and on. So everybody's telling you, and then all of a sudden they're telling you, you need to eat more. Like the exact opposite. And that's
Right.
not what the way my brain works. So when I was getting treatment for the anorexia, the psychiatrist on the unit, and I was on an eating disorder unit in New Jersey for 3 months, 3 whole months. Okay. And they figured out that I was depressed, that I had a lot of depression issues. And that's kind of where it all started. And I had years and years of just being in a funk. Not anything horribly serious, but after I had my child, I only have one child. Well, he's 23. After I had my child, it was kind of like a postpartum depression, and everything stopped. I was sleeping all the time. I didn't want to care for the baby. And with me, when I have my depression, it happens quickly. Within a couple of days, I go down low very fast. And I guess a few months after the baby was born, I was in the nursery, and I was, preparing to kill myself, and wrote a letter. I think I wrote a letter. I don't remember very well. But my husband figured out what I was doing. So he got me to the hospital, and since then it's been this vicious circle of feeling very depressed, feeling suicidal, going to the hospital, being put on a psych unit, and then the cherry on top is when they started doing shock treatments on me.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into that, I just want to back up just a little bit. What was the first time, what age was the first time they actually sent you to someone to see what was wrong? Do you remember?
When I was a teenager, I remember my parents taking me to see, I guess she was a psychotherapist, and
We like them.
yeah, well, yeah, she was an older woman, and she sat behind this big desk, and all I could remember about it was that she would play pickup sticks with me. If you remember pickup sticks,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
okay, not a lot of people do, but we would play this, this game of picking up, the stick without making the other sticks move.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I guess they thought that was a good idea. So yeah, it started as a teenager.
Wow. So you went on for a long time with, with different kinds of depression, anxiety.
Yeah.
When was the first time ECT was presented to you?
Ooh, the first time was that time when I was in the nursery. I was in the hospital for a number of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They tried a myriad of multiple psychiatric meds.
Okay.
The one thing people have to understand about psychiatric meds is they don't work immediately. Sometimes you don't know if they're working until you've been on them for a couple of months. And the doctors generally say 10 to 14 days. Well, I've been almost on every antipsychotic and antidepressant stuff, and it doesn't just take 10 to 14 days. But we had tried a couple of things. It wasn't working. I was going to the groups like a good little girl. And the doctor said, as a last, because I was still suicidal. The doctor said that this is let's do ECT. And at first I was like, God, I thought that stopped that years ago. and that's the reaction I get from a lot of people, that like, we still do that. Yeah, it's done more than you think. So I started right then.
Yeah, Hollywood probably puts it in the past for a lot of us, the horror stories behind it.
Yeah.
Going back, because I know even the first time this story was presented to us, I was like, shock therapy. I was like, it shows you when my head goes back. I think of like the Simpson episode, where every time one of them turned the lie, they'd hit a little buzzer and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what first comes to mind for shock therapy. So I think almost anybody that listens, unless they're in the mental health field.
Yeah. Well, I was a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked as a social worker for years. I volunteered in every type of mission or homelessness situation or just about anything. So I worked in the medical field as a medical social worker, and I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I started learning that this isn't something people talk about. That it's not something that's advertised.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how did they explain it to you?
Over and over and over, it was explained as safe and effective.
Mm-hmm.
And anywhere you look on the web, reading I have problems with my speech because after I had all of those shock treatments, I got some brain damage. So sometimes talking is a little hard for me to do. So I'm going to try to slow down a little bit. It was safe and effective. The doctor said that somebody would have to drive me to the hospital and drive me back because they were going to put me under anesthesia and not to be left alone because my short-term memory would be affected, but not for a long time, and that it would come back probably in just a number of months. He said maybe some spotty long-term memory problems, and definitely I would have headaches. Obviously, if they were sending electricity through my brain, I was going to have headaches. But it sounded completely kosher.
What did they tell you the benefits were going to be?
The benefit, what they said was that I remember the doctor saying it's like a computer. You turn it off and you reboot it. That was one of the things he said to me. It's like rebooting your brain.
Yeah, but unfortunately it purged a bunch of the memory when you did that.
Well, yeah. It worked initially in the very short term. I wasn't suicidal, but I was still depressed. So I went into the office and I saw him every month or every 2 weeks, and I would tell him how I was feeling about this, about that. And I would say, my memory is still kind of messed up. And he would say, just give it time. Give it time. It'll come back. And so the cycle went on of me getting really depressed and going into the hospital. And I was in the hospital probably maybe 3 times a year. If not more. They knew me very well at that hospital, and I was always on the same unit. And sometimes I would feel bad about I felt like I let them down because I was coming back, and they would say, "Oh, you just need a tune-up." Okay. But every time after those hospitalizations, the doctor says, "All right, let's go back to the ECT and see if we can knock this out of you." And if you want to know later on, I'll tell you exactly what happens. But
well, you say, every time that happened, you got ECT, but they gave you over 100 treatments.
Yeah. I only found that out, I think, right before we published my book, because it was nagging me. Here I had written the book, and ECT really takes away your memory, your concept of time. If you ask me, how old was my dog when we got him, I can't tell you. I have no clue.
Right.
So I didn't have a good concept of, I knew I had a lot, but I checked in with one of the girls at the doctor's office, and I said, "Hey, would you mind, counting for me how many treatments I had? Because you did them outpatient, but initially you did them as an inpatient. So you were on their psychiatric unit for maybe a week so they could start the treatments going. And then after that, we would have to be there. It was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We had to be there like 6 o'clock in the morning for like it was like an outpatient kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So it wasn't until the last couple of years that I found out it was over 100. And I nearly fell off my chair. I figured maybe I don't know, I figured maybe like 60. I really didn't. Again, the whole memory thing and the inability to have any perspective of the past has been shocked out of my brain. So yeah, it was over 100. Yeah.
So it's kind of hard because after you just said that, it's like, okay, I'm asking questions about back then when it happened. Okay, in memory and stuff.
I'll tell you when I can't answer.
Right. Okay, there you go. Okay, because in my head I started to panic there for a second. But when did you know? And when did you really start? I mean, you may notice a couple of side effects here and there, but when did you actually start to say, "Yo, there's something wrong here"?
Okay, I can't answer that.
Okay.
Basically what would happen is I would keep going into his office for an office visit, and I would say, "Hey, my memory's not coming back yet."
Mhm.
And give it time is what I was told. Just give it time. And then when I realized what was happening about my long term, I lost about 20 years of my memory.
Yeah.
At least. And I was like, I'm not remembering a lot of I'm not really remembering a lot of things from the past or like what someone just told me. And he said, just give it time. But then as things were going on, we started to notice different cognitive type problems. So it wasn't just memory. I mean, memory was a big thing, but we started finding that I was having problems following directions. I still have problems with following directions, and it's not because I'm just a pain in the butt.
Mhm.
So people would say, do this, and this. Let's say I'm driving and I need directions. I could only remember the first thing they said.
Right.
And it started happening if I was cooking a meal. Anything that required more than one step, I couldn't do. And to this day, I can't really cook a whole meal. When you're making a meal, you want everything to be ready at once.
Right. Mhm.
Okay, so you have your vegetable, you have your potatoes, and you have your chicken. So I can only make the chicken. I can focus on the chicken and I can make it, and when it's done, it's done. But I can't coordinate these
Right.
other things happening at the same time. And I thought maybe my husband thought it was just my excuse so I didn't have to cook. And really, he is the better cook. He does a long day at work, and he comes home and he cooks for us. So he's been wonderful through the whole time. But so it was multitasking, processing like what people were saying. So for example, I was at a meeting the other day for our library. They have a group called the Friends of the Library, and they're the ones that coordinate all of the activities. So I was at that meeting because obviously I'm an author, and now I'm getting more involved with libraries. And they were saying, okay, the date for this is this. We're going to do this, and this is what we need. And they would go through. And I saw the librarian. Literally, I saw her yesterday, and she asked me a question about the meeting. I said, I can't do it. And she looked at me like, I said, you don't understand. That whole time I did not understand a word you all were saying. And I can't repeat back to you what was said.
Right.
So not only was it overwhelming, because that happens a lot of times when there's too much information, I get completely overwhelmed. And that brings on anxiety, which brings on panic attacks, ...
So how does that play with your sense of identity? I mean, you don't want to explain to every single person why. You can't recite back what happened at a meeting.
Not a lot of people pick up on that part of it, on the loss of identity, unless you've been through it, or unless you've had a family member go through it. I was a working social worker, and the ECT got me back on my feet enough that I could go back to work, but not for long enough to take care of the problem. It was really just a Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, at work, I'm sure, I messed up here and there. But it really seriously took away everything that I was. Because I couldn't remember.
Right.
And
exactly.
And a lot of times what you do for a living, your work, is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So we put off me stopping work for a long time. A very long time, probably longer than we should have, because I wanted to keep working. I loved being a social worker, and that was just the way my brain was made, that I was made to do that job. So we did put it off, but eventually I had to go on disability. I used to play the piano. I used to play the guitar. I was always involved in activities. And when I tried to go back and play the guitar, I don't know what it is. I couldn't, I guess, coordinate. I couldn't coordinate both hands.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get it back. And I played the guitar better than I play piano. So I did that
Like
only
me,
because
okay.
I thought it was easier to play the guitar than play the piano, because I still have problems with the piano. But I couldn't coordinate both hands to do it. And I would play guitar and sing. Well, that was out of the question.
Yeah, now it's three things. Yeah.
So doing multiple things at a time, or having any type of a lot going on around me, really overwhelms me, to the point that I have to take a step back. I've had to leave weddings because it was too loud, or there was too much happening.
Right. I'm sure that happens in a restaurant if you're out with your husband and there's a lot going on.
Well, number one, we don't go out very often.
That's one way to deal with it, yes.
Well, when you stop working, you lose your income. So
right.
we really don't go out to a restaurant very often. But on the whole identity, it was, for a long time after those treatments, and while I was getting those treatments, I was just at home. I wasn't going to work every day. And everybody I knew was working. So what was there to do every day? And I remember saying to my husband, one time when I was usually in my bedroom in bed, and I remember sitting up and telling him I needed a dog. I grew up with the dog in the house, and I thought that would give me some company.
Right.
And so he,
And even
I'd
a little
ask,
bit of a sense of purpose too.
yeah, I mean, I grew up and my dog was my best friend.
Mm-hmm.
So he got me a dog. His name was Teddy, and he kind of gave me a reason to go out and take him for a walk. And that's kind of when I started, I don't want to say coming back, but I started doing something positive instead of always being frustrated with all of the things that I couldn't do. Now at least there was one positive thing in my life. And it was my dog.
It's kind of a little freaky for me here. A few weeks ago, we did a show with the couple, and I had gentleman Tim Miley on a number of times, prior versions of the show, and he was about to commit suicide, and his dog walked in to the room, and he looked at the dog and realized who was going to take care of the dog if he had done that. And that literally, he'll tell you to this very day, saved his life.
This
Because
dog, yeah,
yeah,
and this dog saved my life. He
Mhm.
really, in more than one way. When you're spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with an animal, not only do you get to understand their every move and why they do things or just how they do things, but when you build the bond, he would pick up on me. So
Mhm.
if I was anxious, he would be uptight. He would be upset. And having him around was extremely comforting. And one of the problems that I had because of all of this were night terrors. I didn't want to go to sleep at night. I knew I was going to have some kind of bad dream, but it was that times 200. It was, I could see and hear. It's like my body was paralyzed, but I could see and hear a man standing in the doorway. And then he came to my side of the bed. And there is something called sleep paralysis.
Which, believe it or not, Tim's wife had. I'm like, my brain is going like all over the place right now. Yeah,
Yeah. So my problem was I couldn't, every once in a while I could say, my husband sleeps. After 30 seconds of his head being on the pillow, he's gone. Okay. There could be a hurricane, there can be anything. The house can be on fire and he still won't wake up. But I remember one time when in the dream, I was calling for him, and I must have been doing it out loud because he was waking me up, and it took a lot to get me to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the problem. And if I went back to sleep too soon after that night terror, I would go right back into the same dream.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times with the night terrors, I guess I was moving around. I was yelling and screaming and all of this other stuff. And I was falling off the bed. Actually, just last year when we went on vacation, I fell off the bed. But that's because I have a side rail. I have a beautiful queen size bed.
Mm-hmm.
and I have a side rail at the top, just by where I am, so I don't fall on the ground, because it was all the time.
Now, was that a known side effect of ECT?
It wasn't told to me. No.
Okay, but they knew that that could be a side effect, or was this? Have other people? Maybe a better way of answering it. Have a question asking it. Have other people experienced this from ECT that you know of?
Yes,
Okay,
but that's after the fact.
right.
That's after having gone through all of this and finally trying to find help, and finding that help on a Facebook group, which really I only started with maybe 4 years ago.
Mhm.
But when I was having the treatments, I didn't know anybody that had the treatments.
Right.
And if you did, you didn't talk about it. It's not something you go around talking about.
Exactly.
And the name of the book, part of it, is breaking the silence of shock therapy.
Right.
Because, well, the last person you want to know about that is your boss.
Exactly.
Okay, that's the first person, and I learned that very quickly because I did lose jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody, and you can't tell me that no other patient came into that doctor's office and didn't say these things. With as many treatments as he had done, this is hindsight looking back. You can't tell me people didn't come to his office all of the time saying, this is happening. This is happening. Why is this happening? Why am I having night terrors? Why can't I remember the last 20 years? So,
I think they did know.
Oh God,
they
yeah.
don't, I want to say back then, doctors were not as forthcoming as they are today.
Yeah, but back then isn't so far back then.
Well, I know. But still, today, I think, people talk about the internet and it's good and it's bad. I think it's made us a more educated person, whether it comes even like shopping, but especially with medicine. I know myself, I have much more educated questions for my doctors when I go to my pulmonologist than I would have had probably 15 years ago. But I don't think that doctors 10, 15 years ago wanted to tell you.
They still don't.
Yeah.
They still don't.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you an example. Last year, around this time, I was having more neurological problems, and that's separate from the psychiatric depression and anxiety. So because it was more processing information and forgetting things and whatever, I really felt like I needed to go to a neurologist.
Mhm.
And that whole time that I had, all these years that I had the treatments, never once was I referred to a neurologist.
Which is surprising.
Even after explaining all of these things that were happening to me. But as anybody in this country knows, when you go to see a specialist, you gotta wait 3 or 4 months for an appointment. Yeah. So I made
Especially
the
a good one.
appointment.
Yeah.
I made the appointment, but they also asked me if I wanted to see the physician assistant. And being a medical social worker, I love physician assistants because they listen to you and they take your story into consideration when they're figuring out what's wrong with you.
Right.
One thing that she suggested was to get a neuropsychological exam done. And it's basically an exam that tests you on how you solve problems, and it also tests your memory. And that the results of that would help a speech therapist, which she referred me to know what types of activities to do with me. I didn't know that speech therapists worked with people that had brain injuries. But it's not just speech that they do. They do activities, and they build on activities that make your brain work. And for years, my brain wasn't doing anything. It wasn't multitasking at work. You know, it wasn't answering this phone call and then hearing them call me overhead. It wasn't doing all that. There was no stimulation because I was at home by myself. So actually, so I still go to that speech therapist. And I remember the first time I went in for an appointment, she gave me this stupid activity. And it was, you know, an 8.5 by 11. And it was these long lines of letters, just letters, all these long lines. And she said, I want you to find all of the I's and the J's and cross them out. Can normal people do this? She said, just try. So I learned very quickly that I's and J's look exactly the same. It took, with her help, it took about 25 minutes for me to do that.
Wow.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, about 4 to 6 months ago, we did it again, and I did it in 5 minutes.
There you go.
So she was giving me tools to help me to remember. She had me put up whiteboards in the house as reminders. She had ideas. I'm forever losing my glasses, my cell phone, and my wallet multiple times a day. Okay, multiple times a day. So she made all these little laminated cards, and it listed the things that I needed to bring with me if I was leaving the house. Pretty good. So I could go into her office and say, I have this problem. And she'll say, let me think about it. Let me think about it for a while. And she always came up with a very, very simple plan for me to go home and use. But again, I hadn't seen the neurologist yet. And no, that PA was the first one that referred me for any kind of help. And that was years later. When I finally got in to see the neurologist, it was a very short session. You know, the big time doctors, you know, they don't spend an hour with you. It's 5 or 10 minutes. And he said to me, word for word, I don't know. I have memory problems, but I can remember this. He said, I don't treat ECT patients. Go back to your psychiatrist. Well, that didn't go over well. And what I was finding is that the doctors I was trying to go to were saying it was the depression that was making me forget all of these things or having problems processing. No one would validate that it was the ECT because you were putting electricity through my brain. obviously something had to happen, but not one doctor would even say it out. I had one neuroscientist. I did a mini summit. It was online, and it was done by one of the other authors from my publisher. He has a brain injury, and he has a podcast. So he had an online mini summit, and one of the people he had on there was a woman, a neuroscientist. I think she's out of Idaho, because I remember thinking, who the hell lives in Idaho? But she said that what they did to me was criminal. She said that out loud. And I thought, that was the first time anybody had ever validated the fact that it wasn't just in my head. Because the doctors kind of isolate you. And
do you think they know, and they're just covering?
Yes, they know.
Yeah.
They know. And the neurologists know too. But here's the thing. Any type of, in the medical field, because it's not officially recognized as something that causes brain damage, then they can say it doesn't cause brain damage. But hopefully in my lifetime, if I share my story enough times, someone is going to hear my story that has connections with somebody else who maybe works for the FDA. Okay? It's not until the FDA says it, that it causes brain injuries, that anything else will change.
But also what that's going to change is the legalities behind lawsuits. And that's why it will never happen.
Right. They're very...
Yeah. Until ECT is stopped, and then there's another 30, 40 years after that, then it will be done. That's sad, folks, and I'm sorry, but that's reality. I mean, they're really going to protect themselves.
Yeah. You know, a friend of mine who's gay, we're great friends, and he sent me something through Facebook yesterday or the day before. There was, I'm not sure if I can get this out. The Supreme Court turned down one of the state's petitions to ban conversion therapy. Now, a lot of people don't know what that is. Conversion therapy doesn't happen so much in the northern part of the country, but down south it happens a lot. And it's therapists' way of trying to get someone to not be homosexual. It's done with a lot of teenagers when they're starting to realize that they're attracted to the same sex. So the parents are trying to get these therapists, I don't know, to change the way this child thinks. But part of the conversion therapy is they do shock therapy on these teenagers. They do shock therapy on these teenagers because they think it will change something in their brain. And all you hear is everything is a chemical imbalance. That's why we have all these medical, medications and things like that. But I'll tell you the one thing, this is crazy. The one thing that worked for me was not medical at all. When I had Teddy, we would go for walks, and I used to be a runner. So then I would start, well, after I stopped tripping over him, because he kept going in front of me, but I would start jogging with him. And after time, I got into a running group, and they ran like 3 times a week. And that's what, I did it 3 times a week, and maybe was feeling kind of good. So I went to the Y, but the depression subsided. Years after I had my last ECT, I was still on medicine, but I had been on that medicine for like 5 solid years, the same medicines. And not only did the brain injury stuff it lessened, believe me, it's still there to a very high extent, but it kind of, it just softened it. So it wasn't nearly as evident. And it was that exercise, and it took care of the depression. One of my big problems, which really threw us for a loop and was really traumatic, is that one time I was on a retreat, and I wanted to go for a run. There was a lot of downtime, and I relaxed by running. So I was going to go for like maybe a 2-mile run. It was in the country. I said, well, if I have to turn, then I'll just turn right, and that's all. Very simple.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I had no clue where I was. And I didn't understand why, if I turned around and walked, why didn't I see that left turn? Maybe I saw it and I didn't recognize it. So then I would keep walking in that direction, but I was afraid I'd be walking too far. My cell phone died. I drank all my water. It was in the summer, and I didn't know the name of the retreat place. They were starting to send people out to look for me because I was gone for a number of hours.
Wow.
When there was a little church, and I took a picture of it. I saw that little church, and I thought, oh my God, that's the way to go. Because I had seen it on my way in the beginning when my brain was working.
Right.
So I knew that little church, I had to go towards the church. When all of us runners, we have our Garmin watches that tell us, what our pace was, and all of that. We're crazy that way. I had walked 8 miles.
Wow.
In all of that time. I don't even know how many steps. Okay. I wasn't counting steps, but I had gone 8 miles. I was getting lost. I was getting disoriented in places where I had been. All of a sudden, I didn't know where I was. Well, here came Teddy to save the day. Teddy is part border collie.
Okay.
Border collies, number one, they run miles and miles a day when they're herding sheep and cattle and things like that. Mm-hmm. But they also have an amazing sense of direction. And I started realizing he knew the way back to the car. I don't know how, but
they know.
He knew. Mm-hmm. And so I would start testing him, and I trained him, because a dog can have a good instinct or a good um, I don't know, whatever. But unless you train them to do it consistently, they're not going to do it.
Right.
So you have to have a command. And so what I had started doing in the house, I would say, find your bone. He already knew what the word for was bone. He got that. So he would find it. And he got that perfectly. So every time we got in the car, I would say car. And when we went for a walk, when we were kind of near the car, I would say, find it, find the car. And he would pull me. No other time does he pull me. He would pull me right to the car. And then I taught him to sit down. Last year, I went to one of these outlet stores with my sister, but we went with her car. She has a red Jeep, which I will never have. But anyway, we went we went in her car, and so we went to the shops, and people with brain injuries don't have as much energy as
Right.
as people who don't have brain injuries. Our bodies and our minds, if they're if we work them, for example, doing this interview will have depleted everything in my brain. So then I'll have to go and lay down and kind of recharge. But we had been out too long, and I said, I need to get back to the car. And she said, okay. And I had Teddy. And then I realized I hadn't taken my own car. And I'm like, Jesus, what do I do? What do I do now? And I said, I kept saying, find the car, find the car. Wouldn't you know, that son of a gun went right to my sister's Jeep and sat down.
It's for dogs. I had I've always had Shelties. Okay, they're big for me. But even when I lived in Connecticut, my kids had brought them to the park. They were playing basketball and tied them to a fence, and she had gotten off the leash and came home. Okay, and I was always confused. How did the dog do this? But they know that sense of smell, and they know different scents along the way, and they have trained sense that they can find that back. That's why Teddy is so great. I saw Teddy before we started the interview. I saw Teddy was in the background there. So
yeah,
but he's around somewhere.
He's on the lazy boy.
Yeah, a true dog. Okay,
but I would test him. I would go. I was nervous about it, but I would go. We have a lot of trails around here, so this was kind of it wasn't a paved trail, and it wasn't the most clear trail. You had to go over a brook, and step on stones and things like that. So we went about a mile in. Then I said a prayer, and then I turned around and I said, find the car. And I what I do is I have a leash that goes around my waist, because the law, according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is what the law that talks about service dogs, the dog has to be tethered to you at all times,
right?
Or you have to be somehow attached to the dog. So he was around my waist. I let the leash out completely. So I was just following him. And he went over this brook and around this tree and over these things. And then he stopped. There was a street there. He stopped. No cars were coming. And then he walked across the street to the car and sat down. Teddy is my lifeline. I can't go anywhere without Teddy, because I'll never find it back. when I'm in my car, I have my GPS
Telling you, yes.
just in case.
Right.
I seem to be doing really pretty good with driving and things like that, but I have a GPS
Just in
going
case, right.
just in case there's some kind of mix up or whatever. But I can't walk around town, and look in shops and do all that by myself, because I wouldn't know how to get whatever I pass is behind me in my brain.
Right.
It's done. So I can't explain to you whatever activities happened last week. It's erased, or it's in there somewhere, but it's not coming out.
Not accessible, right.
So Teddy he'll find the house, he'll find the car. He saved my life.
See, what I want to say, and I hope people are paying attention to this, that is the definition of a service dog. Teddy is the definition of a service dog. Not because you feel comfortable having your little chihuahua on your lap when you're traveling someplace. That's not a service dog. That's an emotional support dog. There's a little bit of a difference there.
You're very knowledgeable, Steve.
Yes.
Not everybody knows
we
that.
We go through this a lot with I think we discussed it once on the show, but it drives me bonkers sometimes when someone says, yeah, he's my service dog. It's like, no, he's not. Okay, a service dog is someone like you're describing, Teddy, or someone who's maybe blind and needs the dog to see from the seeing eye dog. That's a service dog, or a dog that actually can sense when you're about to have a seizure or something.
Right.
That's a service.
Right.
Not your little pet that you want to travel with. I'm sorry.
I try to. It's frustrating. Nobody warned me, or I didn't know ahead of time how much attention that having him would draw people to me. And it's a very personal illness. I don't want to be going around telling people I wrote the book, so now everybody knows.
Right.
But
yeah, so say you got 1995. They say, you ask him, say you have 1995. Yes, here you go. Let me give you a book you can read all about.
Well, people think because I look normal, right?
Yes.
Perfectly normal. People think I'm the trainer for the dog.
Right, gotcha.
Oh, are you training the dog for someone? No. Are you blind? I might have sunglasses. Are you blind? No. And then they'll walk away. But when it comes to businesses, I have found that I'd rather educate them. And so what I tell them is if there is a service dog in your business, and that service dog is making noise and being disruptive, the only reason that they should be doing that is if they were trained to alert the handler that something's going to happen to them medically.
Right.
Other than that, you should not hear anything out of that dog. And you have every right to ask the handler to bring that dog out of the business. You have every right because it's being disruptive. I've had times when Teddy would whine a little bit and I would get up and I would go outside because it puts a bad name out there. And then everybody bringing their dogs into businesses makes people look badly on us.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Which is the only reason why I mentioned that is because, and secondly, I'm an animal lover from the day I was born, okay? But I've also learned it's been tough. I mean, I might, look at the dog in the eye, something like that. So leave the dogs alone.
Yeah.
They're doing a job, and it's oh well, look how cute it. Okay, no matter how cute the dog is, it's a service dog, and it's doing a job. It's different if we're all sitting around, at a house, and it comes over and it plays with you or something. But if it's not, it's a service dog, and we need to respect that. So I
Well,
want to.
not every service dog. I have a harness or a vest,
Mm-hmm.
and it says service dog. Do not I don't know, the one is do not interrupt, or no eye
Right.
contact, or do not pet. Because people will come right up to this dog who they don't know, and they'll start petting him. And I've
Right.
learned that I have to stand in front of the dog and say, please, I would appreciate you not to interact with the dog.
Right. And people get
But
insulted at that too.
but I explained to them, if the dog is interacting with you, he's not taking care of me.
Right. He's not doing his
He's
job.
not
Right.
paying attention to me. He's paying attention to you. And
Mhm.
people seem to understand it when I do it like that.
Yeah, because if you don't right away, they just think, oh, just don't want to, it's me. They don't want to be
Come,
playing.
yeah, they'll come right over. And in the beginning, I didn't know to do that, but I was getting so pissed off at all these people, and I'm just trying to go to the store.
Right.
And the amount of times people stop me, and I understand he's a beautiful dog. He's
Mhm.
well behaved. He doesn't make any sounds. But when he's in his zone, he has that vest on. He's in the zone. He knows he's working.
Yeah, he's working. That's really what people need to remember is that dog is working. Even though
Yeah.
you don't think so, and you think he's just sitting there looking cute, he's working during the time that he's with you. So
And he has been taught to, if I stop walking, he has been taught to lay down.
right.
I think the first time he did it, I was in TJ Maxx. I think he got tired of me looking at the clothes on the rack. So he got so tired of just waiting that he just laid down. I really do.
Typical male, okay? And good shopping with a
He's
female.
just tired of waiting.
Yeah, okay, you're gonna be a while, huh? Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Listen, I
yeah.
want to go to anyone that watches our show knows every episode we do the lightning round. So, okay, and Lisa and I talked about this before we started. Just short answers, whatever comes to mind. There's nothing that's really. It's more of an interesting thing. Okay, if you would describe your journey, one word, what would it be?
Hell.
Yeah. A moment in your life that gives you hope again.
When I ran my marathon with Teddy.
Cool. Yep. Now, what does healing mean to you today?
One word?
Well, no, short sentence. It could be short.
Peace of mind.
There you go. Yeah, that works. Now, one thing that Teddy has taught you.
Unconditional love.
I would, my brain, that's exactly what I thought you were going to say. I truly did, because I think dogs. Dr. Davis, one of the episodes, I think the one we were talking about with Tim, I think he actually said everybody should own a dog. Okay, as long as they're going to take care of the dog. Okay, they should own a dog
Yeah.
because they learn unconditional love. They understand what
Absolutely.
that means. Okay. Uh, is this something that you do every day that helps your mental health?
Well, right now, well, I'm in Pennsylvania, so right now we're just getting over a very cold winter. Yeah, this was a tough winter, and winter you can call it seasonal affective disorder or whatever, because I kind of start having problems in September when we're getting less sunlight. Yeah, thank you,
Especially
ECT.
as a runner.
I forgot what your question is.
No, but especially as a runner, okay, that's got to affect seasonally, has to affect you.
Well, up until this past winter, I always ran during the winter with my group. We would run 2 nights a week and then a Saturday morning. So what would happen is we would all have flashlights and we would have glowing lights all over us and things on the back of our shoes so people could see us. And when you see all these lights moving towards you, you know you better be careful.
Something's coming. Yeah, right.
We haven't lost anybody yet. But this was the first year that I did not run, and I'm just having a problem with one of my feet that I have to have surgery on. So this particularly was a tough, more difficult winter because I wasn't running. But when I'm running with my group, I also have that socialization. And not only do I have that, and all of these things are things that came together and helped me start to lead a semi-normal life. Not only was I going out 3 times a week, but I was with people that you could talk about your problems with. Everybody comes to running for some reason. Okay. Whether it's the couch to 5K, they want to do a 5K. I know a girl who was pregnant and she wanted to do a 5K before she had her baby, and she did. So, but this particular group is like, it's my running family, and we're always taking pictures after our runs and silly pictures and things like that. And of course we put them on Facebook. And everybody's always like, "Great job! You're gonna rock it." We have a half marathon coming up, so you killed it! You killed it! Great pace! So not only did I have that, I have a cheering squad.
Right.
I have all of this positive energy and they know when I'm not doing as well as usual.
Right.
And they're more comforting, and what can we do for you? And like, when you're running with people for a few years, they start to get to know you.
Exactly.
So if you put all that positive stuff together,
right, it's the positive affirmation and positive energy is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, to everybody, even if they don't have a mental illness, that's so important that we surround ourselves with that. So,
yeah.
What is something people misunderstand about your mental illness?
Okay, give me a minute and I'm going to tell you why. We've been doing the interview for a while.
Energy.
Your battery is like this.
Right, I got you.
Mine is like this. So my brain is about to turn off.
Okay.
And with that, I already forgot your question. So tell me your question again.
I was like, what is something people misunderstand about your mental illness? Is it the memory thing that they don't understand why you don't remember something, or?
It encompasses so many things. Really, the problem is I look completely normal.
Right.
And I act normal unless I'm having an episode. And people don't get that. Again, with me and the dog, people asking me, am I training my dog? With mental illness, I might be in bed for 4 days because put together the mental illness with the brain injury, you have a double whammy. Okay, so then you're dealing with both, and that's way much harder to come out of than anything else. And some people will say, well, just get up out of bed, or why can't you get up and take a shower? My mom was always like, well, you have to have what do they call that word? You have to have
The gumption to
yeah, no, you have to have the intention.
Mhm.
If you have that strong will, then you can get yourself out of bed. No,
No,
that's not the way it works.
I can tell you from mine. No, there's just some days you
Yeah.
just can't. So
Yeah.
before we get too far along, we actually run out of time. Tell us about the book. I mean, we've been touching all over about it, but I don't want it to be
I'm going to
left
show
out.
it again.
There you go.
I never imagined I would be on a book cover. And that was not planned. That was not planned. The book cover came at the end of the process.
hmm
The name also came at the end of the process because it was 20 other names.
But let me tell you, that's a great name
Thank you.
for your story. That's a great name.
I know. One of my running coaches, Joe, was nagging me for 2 years. I have to get my story out there. You have to tell people what happened to you. When I say nag, I mean nag. He just kept pushing and pushing. And a few years ago, my cognitive stuff was getting worse. And truly, I was afraid that it was going to get so bad that I would never be able to write the book.
Right, I got you.
I never planned to write a book, never in my entire life. But when I realized what happened to me, and that's only after I had all of those positive things helping me and running, that I was able to put the pieces together of what happened to me. Okay. Until then, I was kind of catatonic. I was in this big brain fog. I didn't know what happened. And every morning I would wake up and it was like a puzzle in my brain. I have to put together the pieces of the puzzle to figure out where I am.
Right.
And well, what day is it?
And why you like this?
Yeah.
hmm
What's going on? And so it was a long time of putting these pieces together. But I sincerely thought my brain was getting so bad I would never be able to write the book. And he had really convinced me. And by that time, I was becoming a real advocate because I was learning that I wasn't the only one. I found it. I told you about that Facebook group.
Right.
It was the first time I had interacted with anybody that had had ECT. They don't have support groups for ECT. There's a reason. My psychiatrist's office has a support group for everything except ECT survivors. Now, you get us all together, we're going to realize it was those treatments that made us disabled.
Right. Well, and that, like I said earlier, they don't want that. They're afraid of that word called lawsuit. Okay. And, Facebook groups are really, really good. Then just be careful of them. But it is so great. I know myself, they had diagnosed me with IPF, which is not what I have. But when I went in and started talking to people, and you start, and they start sharing information, like even on the medications that you're on. Okay,
Yeah.
things to watch out for, things to be careful of. It's great to be able to talk with other people, like-minded people that are going through the same situation. So,
Well, the thing is that we never get validated, and
right.
doctors don't want to see us. When I found out on that Facebook group that there were people getting lost, I nearly fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it. I thought,
That
oh
there
my
are other
God,
people.
it's not just me. But they make you believe it's you.
Right.
So when I put all of the pieces together and was feeling better and making connections, and I started to treat the ECT stuff as a brain injury, because that's what it is.
Right.
Every brain injury is different. And this one was caused by electricity. Because if an electrician gets electrocuted, he gets a brain injury.
Right.
If you electrocute somebody over 100 times, guess what? They're going to have a brain injury.
Right. But they caused the brain injury.
Well, yeah, they don't.
That's what they don't want to acknowledge, is
Yeah.
that by doing that they cause that. And you know, if anybody's looking to find out more information about Lisa or the book, I have the links in the written description of this episode. So you can actually click on to purchase the book. You can click on and find more information about you as well. So I just wanted everybody to know, because we found that if we just say it on the episode, people are running finding a piece of paper to write it down and stuff.
Yeah.
It's right there. The links are right there.
Yeah.
You can copy and paste them in.
Yeah, and you can find me on Facebook and send me a
Right.
message. I've had people all over the world send me messages saying, "Oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me." Like these messages they're from people in Finland, Australia, the UK, Canada, so many other places, and I didn't even know it was all encompassing.
Right.
And these people are saying, "Oh my God, you described everything that happened to me." So with all of that, because of all of my running and because I've progressed enough to be able to, I don't want to say to be able to speak, but to be able to speak and finish sentence and get my point across, I started realizing that I needed to be an advocate.
Well, you're giving it a voice.
Yes. And it's through the book, I'm hoping that people will realize that this is actually happening and what are we going to do about it.
Right.
I have to speak for all of those hundreds of thousands of people in the United States and around the world who can't speak for themselves because they haven't healed enough to be able to have some kind of conversation like this.
Right.
Without being totally overwhelmed or without saying, "Oh my God, I have to go to bed. My head is killing me," because this is something that causes a very bad headache. I'll probably have a headache through tomorrow. Not because I used to.
No, I know. Well, it's funny because I was going to ask the final question, but I've had one that's been running through my head almost the entire episode we've been talking. Your husband, who we almost lightly touched on, but you know, we talk on this show a lot about caregivers and support and how important having someone who's supportive. And you mentioned what actually really triggered it for me was when you mentioned that he cooks. He works all day long, then he comes home and he cooks. He's got to be an exceptional human being. And I don't mean it to get emotional, and I apologize for that.
The whole thing is an emotional topic.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with being emotional. He I think he has been traumatized more than I have because he has seen all of this happen to someone that he loves.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one who drove me to get my treatments. My dad would drive 2 hours from New Jersey to bring me to my treatments in the morning when my husband couldn't. He sees it every day. He sees me dropping things because my dexterity lately, I guess my brain's kind of on the fritz. I'm walking into things. I'm not, my brain is not processing where things are in space. So I misjudge where the table is. He has watched everything from me wanting to kill myself, seriously going to kill myself, to having a wife that is sitting there and we're watching TV, but I'm not really there. There's no personality. There's no conversation. Years of coming home and not knowing what he was going to find.
Walk into, right. Mm-hmm.
And that is huge for anybody with a loved one that has a mental illness. You don't know what you're going to find when you come home. And that's a very real fear.
Well, two things come to mind when you say that. Number one, love. I mean, amongst all else. And I'm talking on both sides because I know how appreciative you are of having him in your life. It's helped you get through. And I'm sure the same way with your son, that's helped you get through life there. But secondly, and part of what also made me bring it up is we talk a lot about caregivers and how they need to watch out for themselves as well. Because as much as he's giving everything to you, like you said, he's gone through more and it's felt more. So I hope he takes care of himself as well, because he needs to be strong to take care of you.
I really believe that when something like that is happening, they should have support groups for caregivers.
They do have support groups for caregivers.
But not these kinds of caregivers.
No, I know.
ECT is combining mental illness. I hate to say it, but mental illness with dementia.
Right. Mm-hmm. I hear what you're saying. Yep.
We don't have our own category. People with a stroke have a stroke.
Well,
right?
You would have your own category if they would acknowledge
Correct.
what they did. Because
Correct.
they don't, every subsequent step is not there. Because you got to, like they say with an alcoholic, and Dr. Davis would tell you, until you admit you're an alcoholic, you still have a problem. And the same way, until they admit that what they did caused the problem, the solutions and steps along the line are never going to be there. And that is so sad.
There's a national organization, which is a nonprofit. It's called, we call it NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness.
We've had NAMI people on our show.
I really have to connect with them and be a part of their organization, because I tried numerous times to get help from them.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that I called Washington, D.C. I'm a social worker. I'm an advocate. Right. I don't have a problem with calling Washington, D.C. And they outright told me they don't have any services for ECT survivors.
Right. You know what, everybody that's listening, and there's probably at least 20,000, if not more, that are going to be listening to this show. Even if 10% just picked up a pen and paper or an email, because everything's email today. Okay, and just write a letter to your senator, congressman, or something about it. Enough people are going to see this, and maybe, all I can say is maybe. We're in a crazy world right now. I I can't explain anything that's going on in the world right now, but maybe somebody will do something about it. And I might. Okay, I'm talking ahead of Dr. Davis here, but he usually follows me whenever I go with to see it. I might have you come back on and have a representative or two from NAMI, because I have some close personal friends that are representatives of NAMI. One that runs the
Are you
Orlando.
kidding?
Oh yeah, oh very much so. The gentleman I'm talking about is Freddie Morello Jr. His dad was a guitarist, close personal friend of mine growing up in Queens. Okay, where he lived in Queens, and one of my closest friends growing up, who's now deceased, but his son is a close friend of mine, and he's the executive director of NAMI in Orlando. And I have a bunch of other friends that we've actually had one on the show, Steve, who was from the Ocala chapter of NAMI. So we might have you back, and this might be a really, really interesting show to get everybody back together. And I don't want to say, but I also know in the state of Indiana, I know someone who's not a part of the legislature anymore, who's retired, but it might be able to give us a whole bunch of insight on this as well and the direction we should go. So I will set that up in the near future. I promise you, on my word. As a former New Yorker to another former New Yorker, I will I will set that up. Now, Lisa, I want to ask one final question if I can.
You don't let me
Okay.
if I don't say this now, of course I'll forget it in 2
Right.
minutes. Thank you doesn't even cover it. Just for the opportunity that you had me on your podcast. And now you're offering to get me connected to the people that can help.
Yes, without. Listen, Dr. Davis and I said this from day one. Okay, this isn't a podcast for us. How can I explain it? Remember I was telling you before we came on the air that, I got tired of the podcast I was doing. Okay,
Yeah.
because it didn't mean anything. It wasn't helping anybody except maybe the author. And I don't mean that as disrespect to any of the authors that were there. It just wasn't for this brain. Okay,
But
my brain.
you weren't feeling like you were making a difference.
Right. And this show, we literally have said this, and we say it almost every episode, is that we don't do this, we're not monetized. I refuse to and we reach every criteria to monetize. Well, I'm not doing it. Okay, because this isn't a show about money. Number one. Number two, I don't want every episode interrupted by 32 commercials. Okay, because that's what happens when you monetize. You take that chain of thought away. But number three, we do this for one reason and one reason only. And that's what Eric, Dr. Davis, and I said. If we can help just one person every episode, then we did our part. That's what it's about. If we can help a whole bunch of people that are suffering from something that is just not getting the attention, and I can help get that attention out there. I mean, like I told you about the paranormal, we're all friends. In the podcast world, a lot of us are all friends. So let's see what we can do as far as getting that out there, getting to the people that can actually do something about it. Because you know what? People should never have to suffer. Okay, I'm sorry. Wait, this is a mental health show. Okay, my biggest problem is like when I get people that want to be on the show, like when you came forward. Okay, you don't know how many times I gotta say, no, really. I'm sorry. That doesn't fit what the show is about. Okay, as much as I like to have you on, this is a show about people getting help, needing help, and reaching out for help. Okay, well, you've done the first two. Now you're reaching out for help further, and if we can have anything to do with, I'm honored if there's something we can do to bring that one step forward more. And I'm really glad, Lisa, that you joined us on our show today because I'll be honest, I don't even know what I'm going to walk into on any interview. I do a ton of research. Like when you send me information, it was like, I already have that. Okay. I've already done that research, but I don't know what I'm going to learn. And I know Dr. Davis said the same thing because we finished interviews sometimes and the person has left and we sat there and talked for a few minutes. I was like, what? Because we didn't expect what was going to happen in a show. And when we started talking, I didn't expect this either. But I also did not know what the extent of how much it's trying to be covered up. And I don't care if they want to cover it up for financial reasons. There are medical reasons and people need help. And forget about your financial stuff out there, guys. That's not a reason why we're not helping people. Okay. And every person who is suffering from mental health should be able to reach out. We always say that's not a sign of weakness, that's a sign of strength to reach out and have some place to turn to get that help. And NAMI is it's the largest organization for mental health.
I have literally been trying to figure out how to get myself. I mean, I'll volunteer. I'll do whatever. I know that's where the change has to happen.
Right.
But I don't have my foot in a door. And
well, hopefully we'll kick a couple of doors open for you. Plus, I was from New York. I know how to pick locks. So
Steve, I'm just forever grateful.
I know you are. Don't be, because I want this only to start. And when we get things going the right way, then I'll take the gratefulness. Listen, I want to ask you one final question. And this is an easier question. If there's someone right now who's watching this who is struggling, okay, and from something like, the treatment that they got from ECT, what would you want them to know?
The one thing that I have learned about my book, and people have said, it's like a hand was reaching out to me. The book is so validating because it's not a textbook. Okay. Right. It's written very plainly and clearly. You will feel like you're finally connected with someone. And ECT people, we're not connected. We don't have, other than that support group, which is, I'll tell you, it is the International Support Group for ECT Survivors. It's online. If you put together international group and ECT, you'll find it. A lot of people have said that the book brings them a lot of comfort because they don't feel alone.
They feel validated. You used the word earlier. They're getting validation from the book.
I really think so. And for anybody out there that kind of wonders about it, you know what? There's some really interesting comments on Goodreads. They read books and they leave responses about what they what they got from the book. When I read those responses, I couldn't believe it, because I'm like, they're writing that about what I wrote. Like, what I wrote was just me.
Mhm.
And the stuff that they're writing is that it might not be a happy topic, but it's a necessary topic. If you read that, you'll know it's something that you really should read the book.
You know, your story is incredibly powerful. I'm sorry, it really, really, I'm not saying that because you're sitting here and I'm supposed to end an interview with it, okay? Your story is incredibly powerful. And what I personally had learned from it, when you were able to start progressing forward again, is validation. Validate that positive energy we talked about earlier. That validation is so important. And I think personally, that's why your book is so important, because someone's going to look at it, like you said, and going to say, dang it, that's me. Okay. See,
That's
it
what they're
wasn't just
doing.
me that went through all it. It's, I'm not crazy. Okay. You know, my wife will tell me different, but I'm not crazy. Okay.
Me
That's,
too.
you know, you see, it does happen this way and it happens to somebody else. And that's step one. And I'm glad you've taken that step one. Maybe we'll go see what we can do about helping to get step two going, because, you know, now that's become my goal to at least open the doors for step two, and let me see, we'll pull all of my resources. Dr. Davis works on the Governor's Board of Mental Health in the state of Indiana.
I'm
So
aware.
yes, so yeah, let's see what we can do about this. And as I say, Lisa, we'll have you back on again in the future, because we're going to do a show on this,
It
and
would be
it's
a
going to be a
pleasure.
powerful show, and there'll be 6, 7 people. Maybe you might even know somebody else that's suffering through all of
Thank
this
you.
too, and we'll bring them in as well. So that
I
this,
figured, really, this whole time I have been on podcasts, I have written blogs, I've written articles. I did a lecture at a university, and my thing is, if I keep telling my story, someone will hear it
right.
that
Hmm.
can help. And
Well, I hope in my littlest way possible, I
I
hope I can
I
help.
thank you.
So,
Thank you
Lisa,
very
thank
much.
you for coming on Your Life Matters Show podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Stay strong. So, Dr. Davis, before we wrap up, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on some of the things we heard today from her. You know, and we got to see a little bit of the long-term effects of you know, ECT and what it could do on somebody. And I was just discussing with you before we started recording this section. Treatment from what I saw today is like 10 to 15 shock treatments. And that's it. You know, that's the therapy that's it. You know, that seems to be the standard. And there's even criteria for how much you can turn that dial,
Yeah.
you know, on something. But back then, I mean, she got over 100, and she, like she said, she didn't even realize she got 100 till later on in life, when she was able to get hold of her records, that she
Yeah.
realized that she got hundreds of them. And they really didn't even keep track of how much they turned it up. All they would say
Wow.
is, I turned it up a little more, this therapy, not even what it is. So, you know, I don't want to scare people today. They're thinking, well, God, they're going to do 100+ treatments to me.
Yeah. No, that,
Yeah, yeah, that there is criteria now in place to hopefully prevent that from happening.
yeah.
And I also just want to mention one thing about the interview, and I didn't mention. It looks like I'm looking down the entire episode. It looks like, you know, I'm looking down like this, and I'm not, folks. I'm sorry. The camera's been moved here again. I tried different camera placement for that interview, and I realized after watching it back that it looked like I was looking down, but I was just really looking like here. I'm looking at the screen
Yeah.
at Dr. Davis, and that's what it looked like. I was looking down at it, and I was not looking down. Trust me, I paid complete attention during that interview. But so, Dr. Davis, after hearing Lisa's story and everything she experienced, What does that tell us about the importance and transparency of informed consent in mental health care, especially when it comes to more intense treatments like ECT?
You know, like I said before, a person needs, we owe it to a patient. We owe it to a patient. That I'll just say it that way, to make sure they understand exactly what they're getting into, and including potential side effects, including potential long-term ramifications. We were talking about on the medication commercials, medicine commercials, my call's flavor, whatever, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
but that is how it should be. Where
Right.
if you ever notice, all of them say may cause headaches. Well, that may because and they say that because someone had a headache during the trial.
Well, not only someone, a bunch of people
Yeah,
had a headache during the trial.
exactly.
Yeah.
So but that's it's very sad if there isn't transparency.
Mm-hmm. So my favorite story is always the commercial for non-drowsy Claritin. Okay, they used to go through, and then the first thing they said, your side effects may cause drowsiness. It's like, well, time out. I thought you just said it was non-drowsy Claritin.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and it does cause drowsiness. The first time I took it, one of the doctors I had worked for had gave it to me in a medical clinic. I ran a medical clinic, gave it to me. He came back a half hour later. I was passed out on my desk. I literally nodded out and fell asleep on my desk.
Wow.
Okay, he came in to check up, see how I was doing, and like, wow, okay, I guess Steve can't take that. It's something we need to always be aware of, and even these weight loss drugs have
Yeah.
side effects.
Yep.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who stopped taking his because the diarrhea was
Yeah.
really getting to him. So, last question, and for those watching right now, someone who's struggling or a family member trying to help a loved one, what would you want them to take away from all this conversation today?
I think, um, obviously you want to be supportive of your family member, um, another thing you can do is, don't harp on them, but it's okay to ask, did you talk to the physician about any potential side effects? Or, did you talk to the doctor? I mean, what I would say to anyone is, physicians, they know what they're doing. And the best thing that, we need to be transparent with them and they need to be transparent with us.
Right.
Because just like in my line of work, I don't prescribe anything. I can prescribe a, therapy dog,
Right.
but aside from that, or I can suggest, um, but even in, like with EMDR or non-invasive therapies, it's still important that the person knows, like, okay, here's what we're going to do, and this is what this means. And it's just, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Transparency is everything.
And I think, and you said it too, there's no sin in asking someone,
Yeah.
family member or friend that's going, how is it going for you?
Yeah, exactly.
Because you might hear something that they say that they're just taking as normal. That's not,
Yeah.
and just don't, ply to them. But if they're willing to talk and stuff, and if you're a family member, observation is
Yeah.
very important as well. You're going to see something that they're doing that's not. Lisa's story is a powerful reminder, behind every diagnosis, every treatment, every decision, that there's a human behind that. There's a person,
Yeah.
a life, a story that deserves to be heard.
Yeah. And conversations like this are important. They help bring awareness, understanding, and compassion into the mental health space.
And there's one thing we do hope you take away from today is that ask questions, seek understanding, and know that your voice matters in your own care.
Yeah. Please remember, if you need any help or someone to talk to right away, you can pick up your phone and dial 988. You can even text 988 anywhere in the USA or Canada, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Someone is standing by to talk with you. Your life means so much to so many people, so please pick up the phone and start the conversation.
And always remember, you can visit our website at yourlifematterspodcast.com for more information about our show, how to contact us, purchase some official show merchandise. I can pick up the cup, and even request to be a guest on our show. And again, that's how Lisa joins us this evening. And I highly recommend, again, the book. There we go.
Shocked.
Shocked. Okay. As I said to her, I think that's an outstanding title.
Yeah.
For a book. I mean, that's really
Absolutely.
an outstanding title for that book. And remember, if you want to be a guest, fill out that form. That's what Lisa did, and that's how she's here with us.
Yeah. Remember, every step you take is a part of your own unique journey. Embrace your self-worth and keep moving forward.
And also, never forget, your life matters. God bless you. We hope to see you again next week.
All right. Thanks again for watching.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Your Life Matters Show podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share the episode so more people can be part of these important conversations around mental health. And remember, your life matters. We hope to see you again next week.